You lack standards. Many men in their 30s and 40s believe they have tried hard enough. They have worked late, carried pressure, failed, and stood back up. But if we look directly at the results, one question must be asked. What structured capability have the past years actually produced? If your effort has been scattered, driven by emotion, shaped by circumstances, then it has not been a path of development. It has been organized exhaustion. You can endure a great deal, but endurance does not create value. You can stay busy, but busyness does not create breakthroughs. Survival is not success. It is simply the absence of collapse. The problem for most men is not a lack of potential. The problem is that they have never clearly defined who they are becoming. When there is no clear standard, average becomes the default setting. No one consciously chooses to be average. They simply fail to design anything higher. A job that feels stable enough, income that covers enough, discipline that is not terrible, and they call it stability. But stability over 10 years quietly turns into regret. What is truly dangerous is not a dramatic failure. It is a lifetime of almost disciplined, almost breakthrough, almost finished. You are not late, but you are not progressing simply because you have survived until today. If you have not redesigned the standards by which you live, you are not behind. You are distracted. The real problem is not that you lack motivation. It is that you confuse activity with advancement. You can work 12 hours a day and still fail to build a single transferable capability. You can attend conferences, read books, listen to podcasts, and still remain structurally the same man. Motion is not progress. Effort is not elevation. Most men live in a constant state of reaction. They respond to emails, deadlines, market shifts, family pressure, financial obligations. They solve what is urgent but neglect what is foundational. Over time, urgency replaces intention, and survival replaces design. This is how average becomes normal. Not through laziness, but through drift. Drift happens when you do not define what you are optimizing for. Are you building income, influence, strength, credibility, mastery, freedom? If you cannot answer that clearly, your calendar will be filled by other people's priorities. Busyness then becomes a disguise. It feels productive because it is exhausting. It feels meaningful because it is demanding. But exhaustion is not a metric. Fatigue is not evidence of growth. The deeper issue is the absence of a personal philosophy strong enough to filter decisions. Without a defined philosophy, you negotiate with your mood. On good days, you push. On hard days, you rationalize. Over years, this inconsistency compounds. You do not collapse dramatically. You simply plateau quietly. Many men say they feel stuck. In reality, they are not stuck. They are unstructured. They have ambition without architecture. They have desire without measurement. They want expansion but refuse discipline. The environment will always reward clarity and penalize confusion. If your direction is undefined, your energy will scatter. If your standards are flexible, your results will be average. The real problem is not the market, not your background, not your past failures. The real problem is that you have never deliberately engineered the man you intend to become. Until that changes, no surge of motivation will fix the trajectory. Only structure will. At the core of Jim Rohn's philosophy is a simple but uncompromising principle. Your personal philosophy determines your attitude determines your actions, and your actions determine your results. Most people attempt to change results without examining the philosophy that produces them. They try to increase income without increasing value. They try to improve performance without redefining standards. They chase outcomes while ignoring identity. Personal philosophy is not a motivational slogan. It is the internal operating system that governs what you tolerate, what you pursue, and what you refuse. What is success to me? What is unacceptable in my conduct? What level of discipline is non-negotiable? If these answers are vague, your life will be vague. If they are borrowed from culture, your results will mirror the culture. Jim Rohn emphasized becoming more than you are because results rarely exceed personal development. That statement is not poetic, it is structural. Income follows value, influence follows credibility. Respect follows consistency. If you are not becoming more disciplined, more skilled, more intentional, your external life will plateau regardless of effort. The market does not reward intention, it rewards capability. Personal philosophy shapes capability because it shapes standards. When your philosophy says comfort is acceptable, you will choose ease. When your philosophy says growth is mandatory, you will choose difficulty. Discipline is not sustained by emotion. It is sustained by belief. If you truly believe that your future is determined by the man you are building today, you behave differently. If you believe circumstances dictate outcomes, you drift. The power of this principle is that it returns responsibility to you without drama. It removes blame. It removes excuses. It clarifies cause and effect. Your current results are not random. They are aligned with your current philosophy, whether you admit it or not. If you want different results, you do not begin with louder declarations. You begin with deeper definitions. Define the man you are becoming. Define the standards he lives by. Define the skills he must master. Then align your daily behavior accordingly. That is the meaning of becoming more. Not emotional intensity, but structural elevation. Most men do not fail because they are incapable. They fail because their system is flawed. Failure in adult life is rarely dramatic. It is incremental. It is the slow accumulation of small structural mistakes repeated over years. The first systemic error is outcome obsession without capability investment. Many men fixate on higher income, better status, more freedom, yet they do not deliberately upgrade the skills that create those outcomes. They want leverage without mastery. They want influence without competence. The market does not reward desire. It rewards value creation. If your skill level does not compound, your results will not compound. The second error is emotional governance. Decisions are made based on mood rather than principle. On high energy days, they are ambitious. On low energy days, they negotiate standards. Over time, this creates inconsistency, and inconsistency erodes credibility with oneself. Self-trust declines not because of failure, but because of broken commitments. The third error is the absence of measurement. What gets measured improves. What remains vague remains stagnant. Most men do not track skill acquisition, deep work hours, financial ratios, health metrics, or weekly execution rates. Without data, there is no feedback loop. Without feedback, there is no correction. They operate on feelings instead of evidence. The fourth error is chronic incompletion. Projects are started with enthusiasm and abandoned when resistance appears. This pattern quietly shapes identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who almost finishes, almost becomes a habit, almost becomes acceptable. And once almost becomes acceptable, average becomes inevitable. There is also a deeper mistake beneath all of these. Many men never define what mastery means in their context. They pursue multiple directions simultaneously without choosing a primary arena of excellence. Scattered effort creates diluted impact. Diluted impact reinforces the belief that growth is limited. It is not that opportunity is absent. It is that focus is fragmented. The environment then fills the vacuum. Notifications, obligations, distractions, and short-term pleasures take over the calendar. Years pass not because of one catastrophic decision, but because of thousands of unexamined ones. Average is not a moral failure. It is a structural outcome of undefined standards, unmeasured effort, emotional decision-making, and unfinished commitments. Until those patterns are confronted directly, motivation will spike and fade, Goals will reset each year and progress will remain marginal. The problem is not intensity. The problem is architecture. If you do not want average to be your default setting, you need architecture. Not motivation, not urgency, architecture. And that architecture must operate in 3 layers. Layer 1 is personal philosophy. Layer 2 is standards and habits. Layer 3 is execution and measurement. Without all 3 working together, you will always drift back to baseline. We begin with layer 1 because everything else is downstream from it. Personal philosophy is the internal doctrine that governs your decisions. It is the set of beliefs that define who you are becoming and what you will no longer tolerate. Most men never formalize this. They carry vague intentions instead of articulated principles. But clarity creates constraint, and constraint creates power. You must answer 3 questions with precision. Who am I building over the next 5 years? What behaviors are unacceptable regardless of circumstance? What capabilities are mandatory for the future I want? If you cannot write these down clearly, you cannot enforce them. Philosophy is not about inspiration, it is about boundaries. For example, you may decide that you do not miss commitments, that you do not speak without preparation, that you do not sacrifice long-term growth for short-term comfort. Once defined, these principles become filters. Decisions become simpler because they are aligned or misaligned. When philosophy is weak, every decision becomes negotiable. When philosophy is strong, discipline becomes natural. Layer 2 translates philosophy into daily standards and habits. Philosophy defines who you are becoming. Standards define how that person behaves today. Standards are measurable expectations you refuse to lower. They are not ambitions, they are minimums. A man building strength trains a fixed number of sessions per week. A man building expertise studies and practices a defined number of hours. A man building financial stability tracks spending and invests consistently. The key difference between standards and goals is that standards operate daily. Goals sit in the future. Standards govern the present. If you raise your standards, your habits must follow. Habits are the mechanical expression of standards. They are scheduled behaviors, not emotional impulses. If your calendar does not reflect your stated priorities, your standards are imaginary. Therefore, you define non-negotiable routines, deep work blocks protected from distraction, physical training sessions booked in advance, weekly learning sessions focused on one core skill, monthly financial reviews with data, not guesses. These are not optional when convenient. They are baseline operations. Over time, habits compound into identity. You stop trying to be disciplined. You simply operate according to standard. Layer 3 is execution and measurement. This is where most men collapse because it requires exposure to truth. Execution means selecting one primary capability to compound over the next 12 months. Not 5, not 10, 1. Mastery requires concentration. You decide what skill will increase your income, leverage, or strategic advantage most significantly. Then you design a plan around it. That plan includes weekly hours allocated, projects completed, feedback cycles, and measurable outputs. Measurement is critical because perception is unreliable. You track hours invested in high-value work. You track revenue growth relative to skill growth. You track completion rates of commitments. You conduct a weekly review, asking specific questions. Did I execute what I scheduled? Where did I lower my standard? What friction appeared, and how will I design around it next week? Without review, mistakes repeat. With review, mistakes refine strategy. Execution is not about intensity. It is about repeatability. You build systems that function on low motivation days as well as high motivation days. You remove decision fatigue by pre-committing time blocks. You eliminate ambiguity by defining metrics. Over months, you observe data. If progress stalls, you adjust the system, not your identity. This three-layer framework creates alignment. Philosophy defines direction. Standards create behavior. Measurement enforces reality. When all three are synchronized, average becomes structurally difficult. Not because you shout louder, but because your life is engineered differently. And engineering, not emotion, is what compounds over decades. Framework is useless without execution, so implementation must begin immediately, and it must begin small but precise. You do not redesign your entire life in one dramatic move. You redesign it through controlled adjustments that compound. Step one is to document your personal philosophy in writing, not in your head, on paper. One page that defines who you are building over the next 5 years, what you refuse to tolerate, and what capabilities are non-negotiable. If it is vague, refine it until it becomes sharp. Ambiguity is the enemy of discipline. Step two is to translate that philosophy into 5 minimum standards that operate daily or weekly. These are not ambitions. They are baseline commitments. For example, a fixed number of deep work hours per week, a defined training schedule for your body, a weekly financial review, a reading or skill acquisition quota, and a non-negotiable completion rule for tasks started. Keep the list short so it remains enforceable. Step three is to select one primary capability that will meaningfully increase your leverage within 3 years. This could be communication, sales, leadership, technical expertise, or strategic thinking. Do not choose based on ego. Choose based on economic relevance and long-term positioning. Step four is to schedule execution before motivation appears. Block time on your calendar for skill development and treat it as a professional obligation. If it is not scheduled, it will not happen. Step five is to implement a weekly review ritual. Every week at the same time, you evaluate execution against standards. Did you meet the minimums? Where did you rationalize? What will you adjust next week? This review must be honest and data-based. No drama, no self-condemnation, just correction. The goal of implementation is not perfection, it is consistency. You are not trying to feel different. You are trying to operate differently. When standards are written, time is allocated, capability is chosen, and performance is reviewed, progress stops being accidental, it becomes engineered. Over months, this reduces internal friction because you no longer debate with yourself daily. The decision was already made. And that is where discipline stabilizes. Not in intensity, but in structure. At some point, you have to decide whether you want to be remembered for potential or for completion. Potential is invisible. Completion leaves structure behind. The world does not reward what you could have done. It responds to what you consistently execute. You are not behind in life because of a missed opportunity or a difficult season. You fall behind when you refuse to redesign your standards. Time will pass regardless. The question is whether it will compound skill or compound regret. Most men do not collapse because of one catastrophic failure. They erode slowly through lowered expectations and flexible commitments. And erosion feels comfortable until you look back and realize nothing substantial was built. The future version of you is not waiting for motivation. He is waiting for alignment. Alignment between philosophy, standards, and daily execution. If those three are not synchronized, you will always feel slightly out of place, slightly underperforming, slightly aware that you are capable of more. That feeling is not a curse. It is feedback. It is evidence that your current structure is too small for your capacity. The solution is not intensity. It is elevation of standard, quietly, methodically, without announcement. You do not need to declare that this year will be different. You need to behave in a way that makes different inevitable. Raise the floor of what you accept from yourself. Protect the time required to build real capability. Finish what you start. Review what you do. Refine what you miss. Over years, this becomes identity. And identity, not emotion, determines destiny. The decision in front of you is simple but not easy. Continue operating on default or engineer your life deliberately. One path preserves comfort. The other builds capacity. Choose the one that compounds. Thank you for listening. I hope this message does not just inform you, but refines you. Not in a dramatic way, but in a structural one. If even one idea today causes you to raise your standards slightly, to think more clearly, to act more deliberately, then it has served its purpose. The goal is not to feel motivated for a day. The goal is to become better each day through design, not emotion. If you found this valuable and it helped you think differently about your own structure, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. There is more work to do, and the next conversations will continue building the architecture you need to operate at a higher level.